Part 44. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 431. At this time, Lin Yu seemed to have noticed the strangeness in Ye Lingxiu's eyes. At this time, he also turned his head and glanced at Ye Lingxiu, and then said, just smiled. "What's wrong? Is there a flower on my face? Or do you suddenly think I'm much more handsome?" After Ye Lingxiu heard Lin Yu's teasing, she rolled her eyes at Lin Yu angrily. "You are so thick-skinned, but your strength is pretty good. Who are you?" As Ye Lingxiu said this, her eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. There was a solemn expression in the corners of her eyes and brows. At this time, Lin Yu was also slightly stunned when he heard what Ye Lingxiu said. At this time, Lin Yu stood there like this, a hint of helplessness flashed across the corners of his eyes and brows, and a bit of a wry smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. At this time, he opened his mouth, as if he wanted to he said something, but he swallowed the words as soon as they reached his lips. Ye Lingxiu is also a very smart woman. Of course she can see Lin Yu's unspeakable secrets, so others just smile like this. "I don't want to hear it. If you don't want to say it, I won't say it." But at this moment, Ye Lingxiu suddenly felt a very familiar aura, and at this time, Ye Lingxiu's eyes were filled with anger. At this moment, the anger in her body was displayed so unreservedly. At this time, after Lin Yu felt the anger on Ye Lingxiu, a bit of surprise flashed across the corners of his eyes and brows, and then he frowned slightly and turned his head. He glanced towards Ye Lingxiu, with a hint of concern in his eyes. "What's wrong? What happened?" Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on Ye Lingxiu. At this time, Ye Lingxiu's face was ashen. Finally, three figures appeared in front of them. When the three of them appeared in front of them, Lin Yu finally understood why Ye Lingxiu was so excited. But it seemed that their cultivation level was too low. Apparently, the person from the Shu team just didn't bother to waste energy on them, so they just gave them some benefits and sent them away. Of course, these benefits are those alien beast eggs of the evil tribe. Although these alien beast eggs of the evil tribe look no different from ordinary alien beast eggs, in fact they are different. When these alien beast eggs are released, at that time, he still showed no strong desire to control the human race. But this situation continues until these alien beasts break through the Realm Lord level, and their true nature will begin to be exposed little by little. When they break through the epic level, at that time, these evil beasts will started to focus on customers. So when several of them appeared, Lin Yu's first reaction was to see each of them holding an alien egg equivalent to the level of a domain lord. For them, having power is the best thing. As long as they have power, they can even sell their souls to these evil beasts. At this time, a few of them also saw Lin Yu at this moment. Obviously, given their level, there was no way to see through Lin Yu's cultivation, so they only thought that Lin Yu was a master with some strength. At this time, they obviously didn't take Lin Yu seriously. Ye Yu and Ye Hai took a step forward, with a few meaningful smiles on the corners of their mouths, and a trace of ridicule flashed in their eyes. "Color. Who do I think she is? It turns out to be my niece. I didn't expect you to come to this ancestral temple too. This is really something I didn't expect." "Yeah, you just said it unhurriedly." At this time, Ye Hai just smiled, and then slowly walked towards Lin Yu and Ye Lingxiu. "Yeah, what are you two doing here at this ancestral temple? Niece, tell me, it's not right for you to bring a foreigner who insults our people here." After Ye Lingxiu heard that these evil people were beaten down, the anger in her heart was beyond words. At this time, her eyes were fixed on the two of them, and then he said through gritted teeth. "You two, how can you two be so shameless? Have you forgotten what you have done?" At this moment, Ye Lingxiu was even a little hysterical. At this time, after they heard what Ye Lingxiu said, the smiles on the corners of their mouths began to become more and more obvious, and then they shook their heads. What did we do? Don't we remember what we did? Niece, everything must be based on evidence. If you talk nonsense here without evidence, we won't agree. After Yayu finished speaking, Yehai and Lu Xingyi walked towards them. At this time, Ye Lingxiu turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu. Obviously, this little girl was very aggrieved by being bullied by the two of them. Lin Yu couldn't bear it when he saw that this little girl was so wronged. He gently patted Ye Lingxiu's shoulder, the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. There was a flash of doting in it. It doesn't matter. I'll teach these shameless guys a lesson for you, or just kill them. How about that? Obviously, Yayu, Yehai, and Lu Xingyi just thought that Lin Yu was showing off in front of the beauty, so they said that. The corners of their eyes and eyebrows were full of disdain. I say, kid, if you want to pick up girls and want to find a stepping stone, you shouldn't come to us. You will regret what you said today. They said this in a cold voice, with a bit of gloom in their eyes and eyebrows, and the murderous aura on their bodies was even more awe-inspiring. At this time, Lin Yu heard them say this, and suddenly smiled at the corner of his mouth. He just turned his head and glanced at them coldly, with a mocking look in his eyes. Interesting, it's really interesting. Don't say that I bullied you. You guys come together, just to give the earth-splitting bear a taste of meat. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 432. At this moment, Yayu's lips curled into a sneer. It was obvious that at this time, he had been completely controlled by the evil beast. The evil beast was also like this, low level. Human beings dare to look down on themselves like this, and the anger in their hearts is even more surging. Stupid human, I will make you pay. Yayu blurted out this subconsciously. After Yayu finished speaking, the eyes and brows of the two people behind him were filled with a look of confusion. At this time, they were even more like the 2-foot-tall monk, incomprehensible. I have no idea why Yayu said this. Their eyes were fixed on Yayu. At this time, the violent coercion on Yayu was directly displayed. Yayu turned his head and glanced coldly towards them, with a hint of killing in the corners of his eyes and brows. The meaning is even more awe-inspiring. At this moment, I heard Yayu say in a cold voice, "What? Do you have any problem?" When the two of them heard what Yayu said, they couldn't help but swallow, and then they waved their hands and shook their heads crazily. No problem, of course no problem. The violent aura on Yayu's body was revealed in front of everyone. At this time, the corners of Yayu's mouth even evoked a sneer, and in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows, there was a completely the look of mockery. Boy, it's a mule or a horse. Let's take it out for a walk. I want to see how capable you are. Yayu's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and the giant blue-scaled python behind him was spitting out its core. If Ye Lingxiu had not seen Lin Yu's true ability just now, I am afraid that Ye Lingxiu would really be worried about Lin Yu's safety now, but she had also seen the horror of Lin Yu just now. So at this time, Ye Lingxiu looked at Yayu and the three of them with eyes full of sympathy. At this moment, Lin Yu's thoughts moved, and then the Lie Emperor's eloquence appeared directly in front of him. The earth-splitting bear suddenly hit the ground, and then a crack appeared directly on the ground. The reaction of the few of them was quite good, and they avoided the crack directly. At this time, the earth-splitting bear let out a long roar, which seemed to show how comfortable he was at this time. After Lin Yu saw the earth-splitting bear like this, 3 black lines appeared on his forehead, and he was speechless for a while. He just rolled his eyes at the earth-splitting bear. Stop being so fancy here, tear all 3 of them apart, and I'll treat it as extra dinner for you tonight. Earth Splitter Bear just glanced at Yehai, Yayu, and Lu Xingyi coldly, his eyes full of contempt and disdain. These 3 guys are all for free, and I, the old bear, won't even eat them. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what Earth Splitter Bear said, he couldn't help but burst out laughing. And after the three of them heard what the Earth Splitter Bear said, the killing intent in their bodies became even more intense. "Bastard, I think you are just looking for death, blue-scale giant python, kill." At this time, the blue-scale giant python was directly affected by the vast pressure from the hunting bear. It was like it was pinched by 7 inches, and the blue-scale giant python's eyes were pinned straight into it. There was quite a bit of fear in the corners of the Earth Splitter Bear's eyes and brows. At this time, the hunting bear was also cold and glanced towards the blue-scaled python. At this time, he suddenly smiled. "Ha ha ha, this big spicy strip is good, it looks like you can add it to your meal today." At this time, yeah, you heard about the hunting bear. After saying this, his face turned livid for a while. At this time, yeah, you just wanted to speak, but the blue-scaled python spoke to him coldly. "Run quickly." After the blue-scale giant python finished speaking, it wanted to turn around and leave directly, but who knew that although this earth-shattering bear was huge, its movements were very flexible. At this time, the earth-shattering bear jumped like this, and then followed up with the next move. Within seconds, he had appeared behind the giant blue-scaled python. At this time, the earth-splitting bear waved, raised its huge bear paw, and suddenly struck the blue-scaled python, and slapped it hard. At this time, after the blue-scaled giant python saw this scene, the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a sense of fear. At this time, his heart was filled with a kind of panic. However, the reaction of the blue-scaled python was also very fast. The blue-scaled python suddenly dodged to the side, thus directly dodging the head-on blow of the earth-shattering bear. The earth-splitting bear saw the giant blue-scaled python and actually dodged his attack. He was also furious at that time. At this moment, he suddenly let out a long roar. Then, the blue-scaled giant python felt that his mind was in a state of turmoil. At this moment, the blue-scaled giant python was just about to pull away, and at this moment, the bear's paw of the earth-splitting bear came towards him again. The blue-scaled giant python seemed to know that it was unlikely to escape this time, so it gritted its teeth, and then turned its head and glared at the earth-splitting bear fiercely, with a murderous intent in its eyes and eyebrows. "Asshole, since you insist on forcing me to this dead end, I will make you pay a price today." After the blue-scaled giant python finished speaking, its body suddenly expanded rapidly, and in just a moment, the blue spirit giant python had grown to more than 100 feet. The entire Ye family was completely destroyed at this time. The blue-scaled giant python coiled on the Ye family. At this moment in this small town, everyone could see a blue giant python coiled on the Ye family. At this time, the people of the Ye family who were still guarding the spirit saw such a blue giant python coiled in the direction of their home, and their eyes and eyebrows were full of worry. At this time, everyone was whispering here. Our patriarch just returned to the clan. Could this be the new beast that he has tamed? How could the aura of this beast be so terrifying? It's really hard to believe. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 433. Yes, I didn't expect that this family leader's luck would be so good. He got acquainted with such a powerful man by accident, and now he has subdued such a powerful beast. Such luck, the opportunity is beyond our reach. And at this moment, the great elder's face slowly became a little ugly. At this time, his face was also slightly condensed. A bit of worry flashed in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows, and also in the corners of his mouth. He evoked a bit of a wry smile, and a hint of helplessness flashed in his eyes. This big snake is not Lynxuo's. If I guess correctly, this big snake is exactly the one you stole from our ancestral temple. The great elder spoke unhurriedly like this. After everyone heard what the great elder said, the discussion stopped abruptly. There was a look of disbelief in the corners of their eyes and eyebrows. At this time, they turned their heads and stared directly at the great elder. How is it possible? How could it be like this? It's unbelievable. You has such a strange beast. If he took it out, why would we have to look at that guy's eyes now? Yes, no matter whose it is, as long as it belongs to our family, we probably won't have to go there from now on, for fear of that boy. That's right, what Lao Chi said is absolutely true. Since this is a strange beast from our family, then that boy will definitely die this time. Let's go back to the family now and see how that boy died. A mocking smile appeared on the corner of the great elder's mouth, and then he glanced at them coldly. The great elder's majesty was still there, so when they saw the great elder's gaze like this after that, the discussion stopped at that time, and then he turned his head and glanced at the great elder. Great elder, what do you think? At this time, the corner of the great elder's mouth evoked a bit of a sneer. His eyes were full of contempt and disdain. At this time, he couldn't help but shake his head. I said you are stupid, but you are really stupid, downright stupid. The great elder had just finished speaking. At this time, everyone in the corner of their eyes and brows were filled with a kind of confusion. They couldn't understand why the family clearly had such a powerful beast be willing to suffer such humiliation. After a short silence, Lao Chi stood up directly. Great elder, I really don't understand what you mean. If this strange beast had appeared earlier, I'm afraid our family would be the largest family in this small town now, and that person named Lin, I don't think he has much ability, and I don't think he can deal with this giant beast. After Lao Chi said this, the entire family began to whisper again, and many people in the family nodded in agreement. At this time, the great elder also had a slight sneer on his lips, and then he shook his head. It doesn't take a stick of incense to make this giant blue-scaled python lose. Whether you believe it or not, it will be true. If you don't believe it, we can make a bet and take a look. The great elder said categorically like this. After everyone heard what the great elder said, their eyes and brows were filled with confusion. At this time, a person came directly in front of the great elder. He turned his head and glanced towards the great elder. Great elder, I really don't understand why you want to enhance other people's ambitions and destroy our own prestige. After the great elder heard what the man said, he turned his head and glanced coldly towards him, with a rather gloomy look in the corners of his eyes and brows. Don't understand? You are really stupid. Have you felt even a breath from that little guy these days? After everyone heard what the great elder said, they also shook their heads. But even if we don't feel the breath, it's because our realm is too low. But now this strange beast is so powerful, and its pressure can even envelope the entire town. It has obviously reached the level of the Lord of the Domain, so is there anything to be afraid of? The great elder shook his head. There is a state of returning to nature in that man. For so many days, I have not been able to detect even a breath from that man's body, but his every move coincides with the principles of heaven and earth. This is the problem. Where? After everyone heard what the great elder said, their eyes were quite confused. They couldn't understand why the great elder wanted to make others' ambitions destroy their own prestige. And at this time, within the family. At first, you saw the blue-scale giant python being forced around by the fierce bear. At this moment, he also had the intention to retreat. But when he saw the blue-scale giant python later, it suddenly grew so much. After that, my heart felt like this again, and I suddenly felt a little more hopeful. At this time, Yu's eyes and brows were filled with a look of joy, and the corners of his mouth evoked a few meaningful smiles. Yes, just like that, just burst out all your strength, now quickly kill this guy, quickly kill this guy. At this time, Yu was even a little incoherent. At this moment, the excitement in his heart was simply beyond words. At this time, Lin Yu looked at Ye Yu's ridiculous appearance, and just raised a few sneers at the corners of his mouth, and his eyes and eyebrows were full of mockery. Splitting Earth Bear, stop playing, people look down on you now, show your true self. Although Lin Yu said this slowly, the Split Earth Bear knew Lin Yu's temper too well. Normally, if Lin Yu was not angry, he would never let himself show his true self now. Generally, Lin Yu would shrink himself by about 10 times, that is, like a slightly normal body. Of course, for the earth-splitting bear, no matter what its size is, it actually doesn't affect its strength at all. It's just that its larger size makes it look more oppressive and intimidating. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 434. At this time, after the earth-split bear heard his master say this, and he had indeed not shown his true form for a long time, he was naturally very happy to obey his master's orders, so at this time earth-splitting bear also grew up in such an instant. Just a moment later, a giant bear nearly 500 feet suddenly appeared in front of everyone. At this time, the entire town seemed to be under the feet of this giant bear. Everyone in the Ye family who was still arguing stopped their quarreling after seeing this giant bear. Everyone had a look of disbelief in their eyes and brows. At this time, their eyes were staring straight at the earth-splitting bear above the void. At this moment, the corner of the great elder's mouth also evoked a hint of sneer, and a hint of ridicule flashed across the corners of his eyes and brows. How about it? Who is more powerful now? Do you need me to tell you? The great elder said this unhurriedly, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. Everyone heard the great elder, and after he finished speaking, they blushed for a while. Only then did they realize how stupid they were. At this moment, everyone swallowed their saliva. I didn't expect that this kid at such a young age would actually have such a powerful and terrifying beast. It seems that all the choices we have made before are correct. If we are really determined to be enemies with this little guy, then I'm afraid this is the only way out for us in the end. After the great elder heard what they said, he nodded slightly. There was a hint of helplessness in his eyes, and a wry smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Well, if I had had my way, I would have naturally found Ye Yu and asked him to help. But when I saw Lin Yu for the first time, I realized that this guy is not simple. Every move he makes is natural, so at that time, others were thinking of pretending to agree to his conditions in order to protect themselves and try out his true strength before making other plans, but the more I came into contact with him, the more terrifying I felt about this person. After the great elder finished speaking, he also sighed heavily. Obviously he was very dissatisfied with his experience and treatment at this time, but at this time, even he had to admit that he had no way to deal with Lin Yu, so since there is no way to deal with it, surrendering to him is the best way. After everyone heard the great elder say this, a somewhat complicated look flashed in their eyes. No one knew what these guys were thinking at this time. At this time, after Ye Yu saw the hunting bear like this, cold sweat suddenly broke out on his forehead, and then his legs began to tremble slightly. At this time, the blue-scaled giant python knew that it was too late to run away, but he could first release neurotoxin to paralyze the big man, then shrink in size, turn around and escape. So at this time, the blue-scaled giant python was suddenly ready to entangle towards the earth-splitting bear. He opened his bloody mouth and bit directly towards the earth-splitting bear. At this moment, the earth-splitting bear just waved. He grabbed the huge bear's paw, and without saying a word, he slapped the giant blue-scaled python directly. There were no fancy movements, and then immediately after the giant blue-scaled python was slapped by the fierce earth bear, it instantly turned into a ball of blood mist, and a fishy and unpleasant smell spread out, and then a small blue snake suddenly fled away into the distance. The earth-splitting bear also shrunk its size and chased the little snake without saying a word. he directly grabbed the little snake in his hand with a slap. At this time, the blue-scale giant python was also struggling like this desperately after being caught in his hand by the leady bear, and kept talking. Beg for mercy from the earth shatter bear. I was wrong, I was wrong. As long as you are willing to let me go, I am willing to work as a cow or a horse for you. Please let me go. Please let me go. After Yayu saw this scene, a bit of chill came over his body. At this time, he couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, and there was a kind of panic in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. Color. When Lin Yu saw this scene, a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and there was a complete mockery in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. How was it? Wasn't it awesome just now? Why are you so scared now? Look at that little snake. It seems to be begging me for mercy now. Your master is begging me for mercy. Yayu's face also turned pale for a while. And at this moment, the voice of the blue-scaled python suddenly sounded, and then the blue-scaled python was heard speaking in such a cold voice. You bastard, why don't you kneel down and beg for mercy from this gentleman? Who asked you to provoke this gentleman with words just now? Please beg for mercy from him. At this time, after Yayu heard what the blue-scale giant python said, he actually just plopped down and knelt down in front of Lin Yu. At this moment, when Yehai and Lu Xingyi saw this scene, their eyes and brows were filled with confusion. Of course the two of them knew that ordinary people would not be controlled by their own alien beasts, but this Yayu seemed to be a little different from ordinary people. This Yayu seemed to be controlled by his own alien beasts. The two of them just looked at each other, with a kind of confusion in the corners of their eyes and brows. At this moment, Yayu turned around and looked at the two of them coldly, giving them a fierce glance, with a bit of coldness flashing in his eyes. You two are not the same losers. Kneel down quickly and beg for mercy. Otherwise, you two will die. Yayu said in a cold voice. A strange color flashed in the eyes of the two of them, and then they slowly knelt down. Although they were full of reluctance at this moment, they had no intention of doing so. There is no way. At this time, Lin Yu was like this, with his hands folded across his chest, and there was a completely gloomy look in the corners of his eyes and brows. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 435. Lin Yu turned his head and glanced at Ye Lingxiu, who was beside him. Some complicated colors flashed in his eyes, and then he spoke softly. How you deal with this guy depends entirely on your wishes. Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on Ye Lingxiu, and some complicated colors flashed in his eyes. At this moment, when Ye Lingxiu saw a few of them, the corners of her eyes and brows were filled with a gloomy meaning. At this moment, Ye Lingxiu's fists clenched loudly, and then she started gnashing her teeth. He said, "Kill them all, I will make them pay with blood." At this time, Lin Yu heard Ye Lingxiu. After saying this, he also glanced at the earth-splitting bear. Did you hear that? Kill them all. At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, the hunting bear pinched the blue-scale giant python without saying a word, and then swallowed it in one gulp. When the blue-scaled python was swallowed, a cloud of black gas suddenly appeared on Yayu's body, and then the cloud of black gas slowly began to float away. At this moment, Yayu just lay on the ground, rolling back and forth, and the last black flame completely engulfed Yayu. After Lu Xingyi and Yehai saw this scene, their eyes and brows were full of confusion. At this time, they were like monks 2 feet tall, confused and completely confused. Know what this is all about. A moment later, Yayu's entire body was turned into ashes. After Lu Xingyi and Yehai saw this scene, they quickly fell to the ground and kept kowtowing to beg for mercy. My lord, that bastard forced us to do this. We were all forced to do this. We were really all forced to do this. We didn't want to do this at the beginning, but that guy forced us to give in. We have to do this, and we hope that you can give us a way to survive, please, sir. At this time, the two of them were like this, with a hint of crying. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what the two of them said, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth, and a gloomy look flashed in his eyes. Then he shook his head, and then continued. He also sighed quietly. Oh, it's not that I don't want to let you go, but you really want to die, so I can only help you. You said, if I had known about this, why did I do it in the first place? Lin Yu was talking leisurely like this, but it was obvious that he had already sentenced several of them to death. At this time, the Earth Splitter Bear just slapped his hands twice, and the two of them hugged each other into a ball of blood mist. At this time, after Ye Lingxiu saw this scene, she also turned her head towards Lin Yu. After taking a look, Ye Lingxiu's eyes were quite complicated, and she frowned slightly. Thank you very much. After Lin Yu heard what Ye Lingxiu said, he was slightly startled, and then he waved his hand gently. Silly girl, there is no need between the two of us. As Lin Yu spoke, he wanted to touch Ye Lingxiu's head, but at this moment, Ye Lingxiu just took a few steps back, seemingly quite resisting. After seeing this scene, Lin Yu raised his eyebrows slightly, and then smiled. At this time, Lin Yu withdrew his hand. I'll be leaving in a few days. Do you want to leave with me? Ye Lingxiu witnessed the battle between Lin Yu and that person. This little girl was neither a fool nor a woman who knew nothing. Of course he knew that with his current strength and cultivation, if he follows Lin Yu, then he is just a burden to Lin Yu. So at this time, Ye Lingxiu just shook his head and smiled. It's better not to do it. After all, I have lived here for so many years, and I already have feelings for it, and my strength and cultivation are also here. You the eagle belongs to the sky, but I can only look up to you on the ground. As Ye Lingxiu said this, she smiled sweetly at Lin Yu, but the smile was quite bitter. Only Ye Lingxiu could understand the sadness in it. After Lin Yu heard what Ye Lingxiu said, a hint of helplessness flashed through his eyes, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. At this time, he opened his mouth. Sorry. After hesitating for a moment, Lin Yu still said these three words. After Ye Lingxiu heard Lin Yu say this, a sad smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, and then she turned her head. He came and glanced in Lin Yu's direction. You don't have to say that. After Ye Lingxiu finished speaking, she turned around and left. At this time, Lin Yu followed Ye Lingxiu. After a moment, Ye Lingxiu turned around and glanced at Lin Yu. And then he said it leisurely. Can you please leave me alone for a moment? After Lin Yu heard what Ye Lingxiu said, he was slightly startled, but after a moment he nodded gently. At this time, Ye Lingxiu also smiled softly, and then turned around and left. Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on Ye Lingxiu's back, and there was a sense of helplessness in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows, and the bitter smile on the corners of his mouth became more obvious. At this moment, the previous person from the evil clan saw everything that had just happened outside through the mirror in front of him. The corners of the eyes and eyebrows of those people from the clan were full of gloom, and at this time an evil voice suddenly sounded. This kid is a bit unusual. The beasts on him are all those alien qualifications, and they are basically top level. Whether in terms of talent or in all aspects, they are those extremely valuable beasts. Recently, my great evil master is slowly reviving. Those Western gods seem to want to seal him again. He really needs a host. After hearing this voice, the eyes of those people from the clan flashed with some special colors. At this time, he couldn't help but frown slightly. But this kid is not so easy to deal with. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 436. At this time, the evil voice seemed to be slightly angry, and he said in a cold voice, "If this kid is easy to deal with, then he is not worthy of being the host of my great evil master. Stop talking nonsense and find a way to turn this kid into the host of my great evil master. Do you understand?" The evil voice said in a harsh voice. At this time, after hearing what the voice said, the people of the tribe nodded gently. "Okay, let those evil people scattered outside figure out a solution for this matter, but it's time for us to think of a way to break this damn seal. It doesn't matter, this damn seal has been loosened. I believe it won't take long for us to break through this seal. When that time comes, we will be able to follow the evil master to unify the world. At that time, those ancient hateful gods in the west will bow down to the evil master. And the world will also tremble and fear with our arrival, and prepare for a new storm. Ha ha ha. Parting may always be sad." After dealing with this matter, Lin Yu also knew that he must not stay in this town for too long, because there are still many things waiting for him to do. At this time, Lin Yu's eyes flashed with a bit of helplessness, and the corners of his mouth even raised a bit of bitter smile. At this time, a girl beside him would turn her head and peek at him from time to time. There was a kind of shyness between the girl's eyebrows, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "What are you thinking about?" The girl suddenly spoke, and when Lin Yu heard the girl say this, a strange color flashed in his eyes, and then others waved their hands and smiled. "Nothing, of course nothing, but suddenly I remembered that it seemed." At this time, Lin Yu was halfway through his words and stopped directly. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Yalingxiu's eyes also flashed a little confusion, and then she turned her head and looked at Lin Yu. "What?" At this time, Lin Yu just smiled slightly, and then shook his head. He gently rubbed Yalingxiu's little head, and there was a little more doting in his eyes. "Nothing, nothing." Yalingxiu could clearly see that Lin Yu's eyes were somewhat evasive, but Lin Yu did not continue to say more, and she did not continue to ask. This was probably Yalingxiu's cleverness. After a while, Lin Yu seemed to suddenly remember something. "What are you going to do next? Tell me." At this time, Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on Yalingxiu, and a bit of confusion flashed in his eyes. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Yalingxiu could not help but sighed. "I am not sure what to do next. Maybe I should visit some old friends," Lin Yu said faintly. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Yalingxiu's eyes also aroused some complex colors. When Yalingxiu sent Lin Yu out of the city gate, Yalingxiu suddenly called Lin Yu sharply. At this time, when Lin Yu heard Yalingxiu calling him, he was also slightly stunned, and then he turned his head and looked at Yalingxiu, with a complex look in his eyes, and then he raised his eyebrows and smiled. "What's the matter?" At this time, after Yalingxiu heard Lin Yu say this, a strange look flashed in his eyes, and then he mustered up the courage to walk towards Lin Yu. After seeing this scene, Lin Yu was also stunned, and then he saw Yalingxiu coming to Lin Yu's side, and then he pecked Lin Yu's cheek lightly. At this moment, Yalingxiu wanted to ask Lin Yu to take her away, but Yalingxiu knew very well that she had no way to integrate into Lin Yu's world. If she had to do this forcibly, then it would probably only make the distance between the two of them farther, that's all. When Yalingxiu thought of this, the tears in her eyes began to become more and more obvious. And just after this moment, Lin Yu seemed to remember something. At this time, he frowned slightly, and then turned his head and looked at Yalingxiu. "This thing is for you. If you can really refine it, then your future achievements will be limitless." That's right, Lin Yu did exchange a prehistoric beast egg from Arya, but because of limited points, this prehistoric beast egg is not enough to be recorded in the Shanhaijing, but even so, it is the bloodline of the ancients, which means that the future of this beast is limitless. At this time, after receiving such a birthday gift, Yalingxiu's eyes also evoked a few complex colors, and then he raised his eyebrows slightly and turned his head to look at Lin Yu. What is this? At this moment, Ya Lingxiu's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and there was a bit of confusion in her eyes and eyebrows. At this time, Lin Yu just smiled gently, and then rubbed Ya Lingxiu's little head like a doting child. Guess what this is? If you guess it right, there will be a reward. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Ya Lingxiu also playfully stuck out her tongue at Lin Yu. If I guess right, then you can stay. At this time, after Ya Lingxiu said this, Lin Yu's face also condensed slightly. At this time, a bit of complexity flashed in his eyes. The atmosphere between the two people seemed to freeze suddenly, and Ya Lingxiu smiled at this time. Tisk, what are you thinking? Even if you want to stay, this girl doesn't want to. Don't be so self-indulgent here. After Ya Lingxiu finished speaking, she ran away without looking back. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji-Sheng Chang. Chapter 437. At this time, Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on Ya Lingxiu's back. At this moment, he also raised a bitter smile at the corner of his mouth, and a bit of helplessness flashed in his eyes. Alas, it is the most difficult to enjoy the favor of a beauty. This sentence is really true. And just a moment later, Ya Lingxiu suddenly stopped. Hey, will you come to see me again? It's just because of me that you came to this small town. Ya Lingxiu's big watery eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and at this time, after hearing what Ya Lingxiu said, Lin Yu suddenly smiled, and then nodded gently. Of course. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Ya Lingxiu also raised a satisfied smile at the corner of his mouth, and then nodded gently. At this time, both of them were very tacitly, and continued to walk in their respective directions. After waiting for a while, Ya Lingxiu couldn't hold it in any longer, and then she started to cry. Lin Yu could hear Ya Lingxiu's cry, but he didn't stop, but continued to walk forward. After waiting for a while, a figure slowly appeared behind Lin Yu. In this endless desert, although there are few people, there are still a few people sparsely, but Lin Yu's companions, even now he has not seen any. At this time, Lin Yu was like a monk, confused, he didn't know where the group of people ran to now. At this time, Lin Yu half closed his eyes. In this desert, looking around, it was indescribably desolate, and he suddenly felt a little confused at this moment, not knowing where he should go. At this time, several figures slowly walked over from a distance, stepping on camel bells. Those people in this desert should be considered quite rich in terms of their clothes. At this time, Lin Yu, after seeing them, was slightly happy, and then he came to greet them. Sir, please stay. At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, they really stood firm. At this time, they turned their heads and looked at Lin Yu. There was a bit of vigilance in their eyes. They looked at Lin Yu straight. You, who are you? Lin Yu saw that there was a bit of vigilance in their eyes, and at this time, he also smiled suddenly. Don't worry, I don't have any ill will towards you. I'm just a passerby, but I got lost when I passed by here, so I want to go with you. I don't know if it's okay. Those people stared at Lin Yu, but the leader looked quite kind, and he didn't look like those vicious people. But people's hearts are hidden, and you can't know a person's heart by his face. Moreover, in this desert, everyone may die if they are not careful. So no one dares to take risks with their own lives and property, so although that person thinks Lin Yu is not a bad person, he still shook his head. Sir, although we sympathize with you, some things are still a little special, so it's not that we don't want to help, but sometimes the price of helping is too high, so. At this time, after hearing what they said, Lin Yu instantly understood what they meant. Of course, Lin Yu also understood their approach. After all, in the current situation, if you just take in an unknown person, it is indeed a very dangerous thing. So at this time, Lin Yu just smiled, and then nodded gently, it's okay, as long as I don't disturb you. Although Lin Yu felt helpless, he also knew that it was not wrong for others to do so, and at this time he could only move forward slowly in this endless desert again. Tianyuan City. A man stood in front of a couple. The man was quite arrogant, and the golden light in his eyes was surging. It was obvious that he was not an ordinary person. Uncle and aunt, Yi and I are in love. You two can tell me how to make Yi marry me. How can I marry you? I'll tell you, what do you think? My daughter can't marry a beggar like you, so just give up on this idea. Tianyi's face was calm. He just turned his head and looked at Wang Dongzia and Tang Dijun. Uncle and aunt, we are. But before they finished speaking, several people rushed in. Those people were wearing black suits and sunglasses. I say, who is Tang Dijun here? Wang Dongzia and Tang Dijun were stunned when they saw the group of people. They didn't say a word. Tianyi turned around and glanced at the leader. What do you want to see Tang Dijun for? The leader took a step forward after hearing what Tianyi said. It seems that you are Tang Dijun. The man said as he grabbed Tianyi's collar. Young man, stay calm, don't be so impatient, listen. I have told you many times that you must be harmonious and make money, don't you understand this truth? A big-bellied man walked in, playing with a pair of jade walnuts in his hands, his eyes rolling around. The bodyguard who grabbed Tianyi's collar also let go at this moment, and then lowered his head. Yes, we understand. The man said as he walked in front of Tianyi. At this time, Wang Dongzia and Tang Dijun were stunned after seeing Chu Yuntian. Although Tianyi did not know this man, he and his wife did know him. This man was the richest man in Yunhai, and he was also the head of the Chu family, which was the richest family in the local area. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Shengchong. Chapter 438. The Tang family can barely be considered a second-rate small family in Yunhai, but the Chu family where Chu Yuntian belongs is indeed a first-class big family in Yunhai. After Chu Yuntian saw Tianyi, he was stunned. Chu Yuntian still remembers that he was taken there by his family members in the capital at a dinner party in the imperial capital. Anyone randomly picked out of that banquet could make the entire dragon kingdom tremble. Shake. But there was only one protagonist at the banquet that day, and that was the man in front of him. Although he had only met him once from a distance, Chu Yuntian would never forget him in this life. Instantly, cold sweat broke out on Chu Yuntian's forehead, and then he slapped the bodyguard directly in the face with his backhand. The bodyguard was instantly stunned by Chu Yuntian. Chu Yuntian quickly knelt down in front of Tianyi. My subordinates were ignorant before. When I get back, I'll have his hands chopped off. When Tang Dijun and Wang Dongzia saw Chu Yuntian, they were so respectful to the beggar. They were also stunned on the spot. At this moment, Tianyi just waved his hand. Who are you? I don't know you. You must have recognized the wrong person. Tianyi deliberately emphasized the second half of the sentence so that no one else could understand what Tianyi meant, but Chu Yuntian could hear it clearly. After all, he was also an all-rounder. Chu Yuntian slowly stood up. Okay, it seems like we got the wrong person. A bit of satisfaction flashed in Tianyi's eyes, and Chu Yuntian breathed a sigh of relief when he caught this hint of color. Okay, what are you doing here today? Tianyi glanced at Chu Yuntian, and then said in a cold voice. Even if Chu Yunzhen really had something to do, he didn't dare to do anything after meeting Tianyi. Nothing, but just before, Quanzi had a conflict with Mr. Tang, but it was nothing serious. Tian nodded, okay, if it's nothing serious, we still have some things we want to deal with here, so. Tianyi's order to expel guests was very obvious. Chu Yuntian is also a sensible person, so when he heard Tianyi say this, he just nodded and smiled, and then the others turned around and left in despair. After Tang Dijun heard what Chu Yuntian said before, he began to carefully recall what happened before, and then he slapped his forehead heavily. I remembered that I had some conflicts with a young man named Chu because of business matters. I didn't expect that man to be Mr. Chu's son. Wang Dongxia heard that. After Tang Dijun said this, she turned around and glared at Tang Dijun fiercely, and then immediately pulled Tang Dijun and walked aside. Come with me. Tang Dijun was also slightly stunned at that time, and then he followed Wang Dongxia and walked over. At this moment, Ye Tianyi felt a familiar aura, and a very familiar figure suddenly floated past the door. Ye Tianyi frowned, then turned his head and glanced at Tang Yi. I'm going to go out and smoke a cigarette first and get some fresh air. Tang Yi nodded slightly. Don't worry, no matter what choice they make, the two of us are already married. I will be yours in life and your ghost in death. Ye Tian nodded, then gently hugged Tang Yi, pecked him on the forehead, and then walked away. Tang's backyard. Come out. Keek, let me just say you like me. I didn't expect you to be so sensitive to me. As soon as he finished speaking, a graceful figure walked out of the darkness. The man's figure was extremely graceful. If he gained 1 point, he would be too fat, and if he lost 1 point, he would be too thin. Upon closer inspection, this man has willow leaf eyebrows and red phoenix eyes. His mother and son are full of love, and every move he makes stirs up the man's soul. 3 black lines appeared on Ye Tianyi's forehead. I'm afraid people within a 10-mile radius can smell that unpleasant perfume smell on your body. After the woman heard what Ye Tianyi said, a bit of resentment instantly aroused on her face. If you say that to me, it will make me sad. I don't know you yet. The legendary blood rose, Night Beauty, has a heart like a snake and a scorpion. I don't know how many people have died at your hands. You must have encountered some difficulties when you came to me this time. Tell me. Bar. The woman covered her face and let out a cute smile, giggle. You still understand me. This time I am indeed in trouble. The Night Organization has issued a huge fatwa to kill me. After Ye Tianyi heard what the woman said, his face turned cold. What did you, a crazy woman, do again? The woman just spread her hands. I just killed their useless boss. 3 black lines appeared on Ye Tianyi's forehead, but after a moment, his face returned to the calm look before. Forget it, I'm looking for a place here, but on weekdays, it's best not to let them discover your existence. Otherwise, even if they come to your door, I won't help you. As soon as Ye Tian finished speaking, he put out the cigarette butt and turned around to leave. The woman stared at Ye Tianyi's back and said faintly, what a man who doesn't understand romance. When Ye Tianyi came back, Tang Dijun turned around and looked at Ye Tianyi. Although he didn't know how Ye Tianyi knew Chu Yuntian, he must have a big leg and he must hold on to him. But at this moment, countless black shadows suddenly poured in. After Ye Tianyi saw these black shadows, his face suddenly became ugly. After these black shadows came in, they killed everyone they met without saying a word. Ye Tianyi quickly joined them. Although Ye Tianyi's identity and strength were not bad, there were too many of them, and there were many masters. One of them, with a Wuxiang mask on his face, just grabbed Tang Yi away. Boy, I'm going to capture this woman first. If you really want to save her, go and kill a guy named Lin Yu. If you can really kill Lin Yu, then I will naturally send her back to you safely. If not, then you'll just have to pray for the best. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 439. At this time, after Ye Tianyi heard what the man said, his eyes seemed to be about to burst into fire. At this time, Yetianyi's fists were clenched and creaked, and there was a gloomy and cold look in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. "Asshole, I must kill you, I must kill you." At this time, Yetianyi was even a little hysterical. The man just turned his head and glanced at Yetianyi coldly, with a contemptuous smile on his lips. "Boy, there are many people who want to kill me, but no one succeeds. But I just need to move my fingers, and your beautiful wife will be finished, so you'd better do what I say." At this time, after Yetianyi heard what the man said, a few cold lights flashed in his eyes, and the murderous intent on his body was even more awe-inspiring. His eyes were fixed on the man. "Today I swear here that if I don't kill you, I will not be a human being." Yetianyi's voice trembled slightly, and at this moment the man just laughed, and then turned around and left without looking back. Yetianyi's eyes were fixed on the back of the man. Although she was full of reluctance and helplessness at the moment, he really had no way to stop the guy at this moment. After a long while, Yetianyi was still like this, as if he had been drained of all his strength and sat on the ground. And at this time, Yetianyi just picked up the phone and made a call. "Help me check who the people who just attacked me are. I need to be quick. After finding out their identities, I will issue a top-level killing order. No matter who can kill them, I can make any conditions." Yetianyi's voice did not contain a trace of warmth, just like the weather in the cold winter, which made people shudder. At this moment, the person on the other end of the phone couldn't help but frown slightly after hearing what Yetianyi said. At this time, he half closed his eyes. "Are you really sure you want to do this? If this is the case, you might be involved in a very troublesome matter. I'm afraid." The man stopped talking halfway, and at this time, Yetianyi sneered after hearing what the man said, and his eyes flashed a bit of gloom. "I said, can't you hear it clearly?" At this time, the man opened his mouth after hearing what Yetianyi said, and wanted to say something, but the words were swallowed back by him. At this time, he nodded gently. "Okay, I'll do as you say, but be careful." The man's voice was a little hoarse. At this time, Yetianyi just nodded gently, and then he rushed straight out the door. Yetianyi called the locals again. "Help me find a guy named Lin Yu, and be quick. I want to know what his identity is." The person on the other end of the phone was slightly surprised when Yetianyi said this, and a bit of confusion flashed in his eyes. "What? Lin Yu? I have never heard of this name. How did this guy offend you? Come and tell me, I will see if there is any way to deal with this kid." At this time, Yetianyi sighed after hearing what the man said, and then a bit of helplessness flashed in his eyes. "Alas, you don't know, this matter is very troublesome, help me find this person quickly, as for the rest of the things, you don't need to worry about it." After Yetianyi finished speaking, he hung up the phone directly, and after hearing what Yetianyi said, the person on the other end of the phone just smiled and shook his head, but didn't say anything more. In this endless desert, Lin Yu walked forward alone with difficulty. At this time, he only felt that he was unusually cold. Lin Yu looked around and found that this was an endless desert. He should never have this feeling, but he actually had this feeling now. At this time, Lin Yu's eyes suddenly flashed with a bit of confusion. His brows seemed to be twisted together, and then he shook his head. "Strange, it's really strange. Why do I suddenly have this feeling? Why do I suddenly feel that this place is so cold? What is going on?" At this time, he saw the caravan again. At this time, the caravan was walking in the desert. It was originally peaceful, but at this time, a group of people suddenly blocked their way. The group of people seemed to have emerged from the desert out of thin air. When they saw that group of people, their faces were filled with solemnity. At this time, their eyes were fixed on the people coming from the opposite side, and there was an expression of disbelief in their eyes and eyebrows. "No, something bad is going on. There are horse bandits. There are horse bandits coming. Get out quickly, get out quickly. The leader was shouting like this crazily. His voice was slightly hoarse, and his words were full of confusion. Horrified. At this time, after everyone heard what he said, they also wanted to leave and retreat. However, it was too late for them to retreat at this time, because several horse bandits had even jumped out. Jumped directly in front of them. Those people's eyes were staring straight at them, with a faint smile on the corners of their mouths, and a kind of mockery in their eyes. I still want to leave now, but I'm afraid it's a little late. Today I have to leave either money or life. Of course, we have no problem with both of them. After that person finished speaking, the people around him laughed at the same time, with excitement in the corners of their eyes and brows. At this moment, the faces of all the people around him began to look a little ugly, and their eyes were fixed on that person, with a rather cold light in their eyes. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Sheng Chong. Chapter 440. At this time, several people walked out from among them. These people came to the front of the leader, and then they gave a respectful fist-cup salute to the person. Since you have said so, we can't help but give him face. We are willing to spend money to buy our lives, and we hope that he can keep his word. The leader heard what he said. After he said this, he turned his head towards him and glanced coldly, with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. Are you negotiating terms with me now? The voice of the leader was rather gloomy and cold. At this time, several horse bandits rushed out and slashed directly towards the man. The moves of the horse bandits were very special, and they were obviously specially trained. Zhao Ming, after seeing this scene, his face also condensed slightly. At this time, a bit of solemnity flashed across his face, and there was a bit of gloominess in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. But at this time, Zhao Ming certainly knew that a little impatience would ruin a big plan, not to mention that in this caravan, the money was secondary, and the safety of his eldest daughter was the most important. Although the skills of these two people at this moment may not be as good as his, he just fought them off. At this moment, he saw Zhao Ming, first turning sideways to the left, and then using his left leg as an axis, he kicked out like this. The two horse bandits were also Lianjiazi, so at this time, without saying a word, they turned slightly sideways to the side. But they obviously underestimated the strength of Zhao Ming's right leg. The two of them were kicked out by Zhao Ming, and finally fell heavily to the ground. Zhao Ming glanced in their direction, and then performed a fist-cup salute, with a faint smile on his lips. I accept it, I accept it. After Scar saw Zhao Ming like this, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth, and then he glanced coldly at Zhao Ming. He is quite capable indeed. No wonder he dares to walk in this desert. At this time, after Zhao Ming heard what Scar said, he thought he was safe this time, so at this time he just smiled and waved his hand. Sir, what are you talking about? With my three-legged cat skills, there is absolutely no way I can be a match for you. At this time, Scar laughed loudly after hearing what Zhao Ming said. At this time, he stood up suddenly and rushed towards them. At this time, Scar suddenly kicked Zhao Ming on the chest, and Zhao Ming flew backwards quickly, and finally fell heavily to the ground. At this moment, a small black snake suddenly bit Zhao Ming's neck along the desert. At this time, Zhao Ming only felt a pain in his neck, and then just as he was about to look back, he felt his chest was surging. Finally, he suddenly spit out a mouthful of black blood. After the person next to Zhao Ming saw this scene, his face became pale and suddenly became ugly. At this time, he quickly came to Zhao Ming's side, and then slowly moved to Zhao Ming's side. Zhao Ming was helped up. Are you okay? At this time, Zhao Ming was obviously taking in less air and releasing more air. Zhao Ming's eyes were filled with a sense of unwillingness. He just stretched out his hand and pointed at the person. It was a complete look of disbelief. You. At this time, after Zhao Ming said the word you 3 times in a row, he died on the spot. At this time, the man slowly walked towards them. He kicked the man holding Zhao Ming away with one kick, and then a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. What am I? What are you? You, dear, just die. You have been wasting my time here. Someone wants to buy your life. So when you get to the underworld, don't bear grudges against me. This matter has nothing to do with me. The man just said it unhurriedly. After hearing what the man said, everyone looked at each other in confusion. You looked at me and I looked at you. They had no idea what was going on. Scar waved his hand gently, and then, countless people rushed towards them in an instant. At this time, a woman walked out of the camel-pulled desert vehicle. The woman was extremely beautiful, somewhat exotic, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a graceful figure. After Scar saw the woman, his eyes seemed to have grown on her body. At this time, Scar's eyes were full of greed. At this moment, the smile on the corner of his mouth, it started to become more and more obvious. At this time, Scar even made the sound of swallowing saliva. The woman slowly walked towards Scar. She just glanced coldly at Scar, with a bit of gloominess flashing in her eyes. Who sent you to kill me? Even if you let me die, you have to let me die. The woman didn't look scared. At this time, after Scar heard what the woman said, he also laughed out loud. A playful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and a hint of playfulness flashed in his eyes. Beauty, if you listen to me obediently, no one will kill you. Do you understand? Scar was pinned on the woman with a smile on his face, and the smile on the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, after the woman heard what Scar said, she suddenly laughed, and her eyes were fixed on Scar. Oh, are you serious? I tend to take those jokes seriously, so don't lie to me. The woman stared at Scar with a smile on her face, and Scar was also refreshed at this time. He nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice. Of course it's true, of course it's true. I, Scar, never lie to you. As long as you are willing to go back with me, you will be the wife of the bandit.